Hello, and thank you for joining us for another episode of This Week in AML. I'm John Byrne, Chair of the AMLRS Advisory Board.
And I'm Elliot Berman, our Creative Director. We are excited to welcome you to the This Week in AML podcast,
where we explore key news and developments in the global financial crime prevention community.
Hi, John. How are you this week?
Good, Elliot. How are you doing?
I'm okay. We've had 3 days of rain here in the Midwest, but it's okay. We could use the water, actually. We had a light snow winter. So a couple of things this week, as opposed to just focusing on one. I know you were at the ACAMS AML and Financial Crime Conference in Hollywood, Florida, and you mentioned earlier when we were speaking that you heard an interesting announcement, if you will, from DOJ. So what was that about?
Yeah, it was interesting because there wasn't any preview of this. You know, a lot of times when agencies speak, you sort of know in advance thematically what they're going to cover, maybe not the specifics. But the Department of Justice spoke on Tuesday of the conference. Kenneth Polite from the Criminal Division. He's the division, DOJ's head of DOJ's Criminal Division. Talked about a whole series of things, you know, the importance of working with the AML community and the financial sector, really positive stuff. But he also said that the division is going to direct prosecutors, as he put it, to consider requiring that chief compliance officers and CEOs certify at the end of a settlement about the company's compliance program that it is, quote, reasonably designed and implemented to detect and prevent violations of law. So, so it would sort of mitigate during the settlement some of the fines and penalties. That's the theory, at least. No specifics yet, other than what I just told you, and it's not simply limited to financial institutions. It's anything under the purview of the criminal division, which is broad, as you know. But I think that what was not funny, but interesting to watch is that when the panel came up right after that, they were asked to comment on it. And of course, they said what you and I would say. Well, we want to see the specifics, obviously.
Right.
You know, it sounds very close to what New York did, the section, I think, 504 from a few years ago, right? And I remember when we were sort of dealing with that issue, sort of the logical thing that you and I as lawyers would say is, why would you sign something like that when there's pretty clearly no way that you can, ensure that the compliance program was, as they say, it met all its obligations and that sort of thing. And so I think that's obviously more than problematic. I think it comes from a sincere place, as I think also some other folks said, but really interesting. Again, not directed necessarily at our community, but it would clearly impact our community. I've always believed, and I know that you've been involved in similar policy and other issues other debates where it's basically if the compliance officer at a minimum doesn't have authority, isn't at the table, as it were, at senior management, to have to sign something to certify that the program is run effectively, I would never advise them to do that. So even if you have decision-making authority, it's problematic. So I thought that was a really interesting, I won't say curveball, because it's good, I think, in general, that DOJ is going to be focusing on white-collar crime again. But I think the audience was clearly taken aback.
Yeah, it's interesting. There are other certification regimes. 504 is a good example. Financial statements and other related things for the SEC are now certified and have been for quite some time now, by the CEO and the CFO. And what many of those types of regimes tend to spawn internally is an upward cascading set of certifications where, people around the organization who have something to do with what ultimately has to be certified at the top of the shop there are internal certifications. Yes, we've actually done a diligence on this system or this function or this requirement, and we're certifying to you, top of the shop certifier, in this case, the chief compliance officer, that everything's doing what it's supposed to do. How that's the way to give someone at the top of the shop comfort, but it's not something that you can fall back on if it turns out your certificate. You can't fall back to with the government if your certification tends to not end up being fully effective. So obviously more to come.
Yeah, I mean, the good news is, I think those of us in our community, anything that emphasizes the importance of compliance operations and results in additional resources, not just for the personal interests of companies like ours that provide that, but more importantly, we've always believed that the compliance officers need support, need resources, and need to have decision-making power. So obviously we'll see how that plays out. So that was one thing. The other thing that we saw today is Chairman Waters for the House Financial Services Committee sent a letter, again, just today on the 24th, and this will post on tomorrow, but sent a letter to various trade associations that represent financial and the commercial industry, asking for specific information on what those institutions have done to end their relationships, their disinvestment, if you will, with Russia. So this is in part just a response to obviously the ongoing terrible things that are happening in Ukraine. But President Zelensky spoke to the Congress, I believe earlier this week, and in reaction to that, Chairman Waters said it was really important. She knows that a lot of companies are doing some things, but having more specificity would help Congress in terms of maybe additional legislation, support, what have you. So I think that was it. And some of the things that the committee is interested in, if the letter is on their website, is action undertaken, by the affected industry group or the industry members that have decided to exit or wind down businesses, including both financial relationships and general relationships, since February 24th. The identity of the companies that continue to engage, that might be a tougher one, but we'll see, with Russia and Russia-based firms, and what are their plans to either wind down, and the reasons why they plan to continue, like what's happening there, and then how are you complying with U.S. and allied sanctions? Obviously, the last one, also like we just talked about, a little problematic to put in a letter how you're complying, because if you were asking me that, I would certainly say I'm following the EU sanctions or the OFAC sanctions or what have you. So I think there is some direction on how to respond to this. So there's some guidance, but that's generally what the committee is asking for. And again, it makes sense, because in order to make some potential policy changes, if necessary, or legislative changes, get a sense of where we are.
Yeah. It'll be interesting to see. I assume that some of the responses that she and the committee receive will be ultimately become public. So it'll be very interesting to see what that information and what those statements look like.
Right. Yeah. And, again, we know that'll happen. That does happen. That's why I think I understand the request, but there has to be sort of also recognition on the part of Congress that the response to the request has to be carefully crafted because of that. I mean, I think that's obvious. And you also don't want to detail your plans so that these companies can evade them. I don't mean the U.S. companies, but the entities that you're dealing with Russia somehow can impact, whatever. I mean, smart people, unfortunately, can figure some of this out, and we'll see the responses. I think they're asking for this information in the course of the next week or so. So we'll see what happens. But anyway, a lot more to come. That same statement also includes a number of the legislative activities that have occurred in the past a couple of weeks, and some of the bills that have passed committee dealing with oligarchs, dealing with sanctions, debt repayment, how to isolate government officials. There's a lot there, as we hope everybody's doing. Stay current, check the government website, congressional websites, agency websites, FATF, all the logical places you'd go to stay on top of this.
Yep. It is a dynamic situation, and I don't think it's going to calm down in the very near term.
And what do we have coming up? I will just say, just briefly, and I'm not sure when we're going to run this, but I'm going to have a video cast tomorrow, not a live video cast, but we're going to record it and run it at some time in the future on a continuing challenge, and that's on antiquity smuggling. I have 3 excellent experts that I'm going to sit down with tomorrow and talk to them about the financial investigative aspect of that. So we will, post that at some point, obviously in the future. I'm going to chat with them tomorrow, and we're always looking for more ideas from our listeners. Who else can we be interviewing, and what other topics do you want to hear?
Yes, that's true. And so continue to watch our webpage for additional content. We're busy and with lots of it. There was today we had a webinar on high-risk customers from a global perspective, and you'll start to see pieces of that webinar posting in the next several weeks. So look for that. Always an issue that we have to deal with, and particularly in the light of the rush of new sanctions, high risk, now has an additional dimension. So,
great. Well, Elliot, thanks for chatting with me today, and again, thanks everybody for listening. You can always subscribe to this wherever you get your podcasts, and write a review. Give us some input. We'd really appreciate it.
All right, John. Have a good week.
You too. Take care.
Yep. Bye-bye.